Hey everyone, I'm Vladimir Jutiv. We are watching all the news happening in the United States and around the world. Diddy's lawyers make a bid to get him out of jail one day after he was charged with sex trafficking and racketeering in federal court. Why the judge in the case denied bail and what happens next in the case. It's the video a lot of people are talking about. Lebanon and Iran blame Israel and the West for a mass attack of exploding pagers. The small devices have killed at least a dozen people and injured hundreds more. And it is Fed Day, the long-awaited moment. The Federal Reserve is poised to lower interest rates for the first time in years. We look at by how much and how it could impact your family. This is CBS News 24/7. Attorneys for music mogul Sean Diddy Combs will be back in court this morning attempting to appeal the judge's decision to deny Combs' bail as he awaits trial on a wide range of changes involving the involving the alleged serial abuse of women. Combs has pleaded not guilty to all of those charges. Joining me now with the very latest is CBS News national correspondent Jerika Duncan. She's joining me from outside of the courthouse there in New York City. So, Jerika, do we know why the judge denied Combs' bail? I asked this to a lawyer yesterday. He actually thought this was before the judge's decision. He thought that Combs would be allowed out.
Vlad, but I believe you're asking why the judge decided to deny bail for Sean Diddy Combs. This really comes down to the arguments that prosecutors were able to make. They called him a serial abuser, a serial obstructor, and gave many different allegations and why they feel like he does not deserve to be out free until his trial starts. They talked about, and just days ago, they said he made phone calls to someone to make statements about him and his behavior that were contrary to ones made in a recent lawsuit. And the prosecutors noted that he had reached out to this person to make positive statements on his behalf at least 50 times, they said. And that was just a week ago, knowing that prosecutors were going to be arresting him due to this indictment. So that was just one example of many that prosecutors gave inside the courtroom. But, you know, today, of course, we're going to find out if the appeal for that bail denial works in favor of Sean Diddy Combs or if he will be remanded back to jail, which would be huge because it could be a year, it could be 2 years before his actual trial starts. And speaking with our legal expert, Ricky Kleeman, we just don't really know. But the idea of someone who has so much influence in hip-hop culture, but obviously has influence, prosecutors say, in witnesses and victims and things like that, that they're using to build their case, they want him behind bars. But definitely a fall from grace and not something I think that Sean Diddy Combs expected when going into that courtroom yesterday. I don't think he was expecting that he was going to have to go back to jail after offering up $50 million, even his $48 million mansion that he paid his full mortgage on as a way to say in good faith, I'm not going anywhere. I would not flee the country. I would stay where I'm supposed to and cooperate with authorities.
Jerika, while we have you, you're not far from where Harvey Weinstein is also going to be due in court today. What can you tell us about that?
That's right, Vlad. He is expected to be arraigned on sex charges, more criminal sex charges. We're not really sure yet if he has arrived in court. At last check, he has not. But that's also something that we'll be watching while we're downtown here today. Vlad? All
right. Jerika Duncan for us at the courthouse today in New York City. Thanks, Jerika. Hezbollah is vowing revenge after what appeared to be a wide-scale coordinated attack on the group. At least a dozen people across Lebanon and Syria were killed and thousands were injured when explosive devices inside pagers detonated simultaneously across the region. Hezbollah blames Israel, but Israel has yet to comment on the attack. CBS News foreign correspondent Chris Livesay has the very latest.
Good morning. Well, Hezbollah is clearly reeling from that unlikely attack. While Israel has not claimed responsibility, nonetheless, it's bracing for retaliation. Now, in a region defined by brazen attacks, this one was unlike any other. Pagers in the pockets, hands, and vehicles of Hezbollah militants exploding simultaneously in streets and grocery stores, all the way to the Iranian ambassador in Lebanon, who escaped with minor injuries. Throngs more flooded hospitals with severed limbs and bloodied faces. But the most stinging blow is psychological and operational. as a former CIA intelligence director tells us, devastating Hezbollah's confidence as well as its ability to communicate and function as a military force. Now, the vexing question for Hezbollah is how. Initial reports suggest the beepers were tampered with before they were imported into Lebanon, booby-trapped with as little as 1 or 2 ounces of high explosives. Now, American officials have pointed to a Taiwanese company as the supplier, and that supplier says the beepers were made by a licensing partner based in Hungary. Several months ago, Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah told his men to get rid of their smartphones to evade Israeli tracking. Backed by Iran, Hezbollah has been exchanging fire with Israel for nearly a year, forcing Israelis to flee their homes on the country's northern border by the tens of thousands. Israel has vowed to end the fighting and, if necessary, through force. This morning, Hezbollah issued a statement saying Israel should expect retaliation, but taken by surprise as they were, Hezbollah must also be weighing if there are more security breaches that have yet to be exploited. Vlad?
All right, Chris Livesay reporting from Tel Aviv for us. Thank you. Now, all this is happening while U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is in the Middle East for talks with Egypt's president in hopes of diffusing the escalating tensions and reaching a ceasefire deal in Gaza. He addressed those exploding pagers incident during a press conference earlier today. Listen.
The United States did not know about, nor was it involved in these incidents, and we're still gathering the information and gathering the facts. Broadly speaking, we've been very clear, and we remain very clear, about the importance of all parties avoiding any steps that could further escalate the conflict that we're trying to resolve in Gaza, to see it spread to other fronts.
CBS News national intelligence and national security reporter Olivia Gazis joins me now with more to talk about this. So, Olivia, this is a remarkable story. How is the situation in Lebanon impacting Blinken's ability to negotiate with Egypt?
Sure, Vlad, it's great to be with you. It sure isn't helping because, as you know well, part of this administration's preeminent goal for the region has been to prevent a spillover of the conflict in Gaza to involve other players in the region. And as you heard Chris lay it out, obviously Hezbollah has already vowed a harsh revenge, and this risks bringing the Iranians back into the fray as well, both as backers of Hezbollah as a group and because, as you heard, the Iranian ambassador to Lebanon was directly injured as a part of this attack. Officials had just stopped holding their breath and exhaled a little bit after very heightened tensions, wary of a retaliatory strike from Iran after the assassination in Iran of Ismail Haniyeh, the high-ranking Hamas official that happened in July. And now it looks as though some level of retaliation from one or both actors may in fact happen. Blinken's trip to Cairo was supposed to be in furtherance of a renewed bridging proposal that was to be presented to all of the mediating parties to try to get to yes on a broader ceasefire deal. And there's no question that an escalatory step like this one makes that more complicated.
So, Olivia, let me ask you about what Egypt's president has said, which is to intensify those ceasefire and peace talks between Israel and Hamas. What does that mean, intensify, and where are they not able to reach any kind of consensus?
Sure. Well, the secretary as well was heaped praise on the Egyptians for all that they have been doing in order to facilitate talks, in order to keep things stable in the region. But the sticking points in the broader ceasefire deal at this point are pretty well known. Officials have been trying to keep them quiet, but we do know that one major sticking point is whether and how many Israeli forces are allowed to remain in the Philadelphia corridor, which is in the south of Gaza. The Egyptians and Hamas have raised objections to virtually any long-term military presence there. The Israelis claim that they need to do that in order to prevent Hamas from reconstituting. Also at issue is the number and the type of Palestinian prisoners that would be released in exchange for the remaining hostages that are being held by Hamas in Gaza. And there are ancillary implementation issues that officials have noted are complicating getting to, again, that final agreement. The secretary is meeting on a bilateral basis with Egyptian officials. He met with President Sisi and the Foreign Minister Abdullahi on a range of, again, things that involve just Egypt and the U.S., but of course broader discussions about how to stabilize Gaza and hopefully get to a deal are top of the agenda. It's just not clear, given this week's recent developments, whether those things are derailed completely or postponed temporarily.
All right, Olivia Gazas, we know that you'll be following this very, very closely for us from the State Department. Olivia, as always, we appreciate you. Thanks.
Thanks, Vlad.
All right, let's take you now to Washington, D.C., where members of the families of hostages being held by Hamas in Gaza are speaking. Their loved ones have now been held in captivity for nearly a year. Let's watch.
So we thank you for your part in hearing that and trying to get that message out, whether one supports Hamas or Israel. The only way out of this is by reaching a deal, through which, of course, our loved ones come home, but the people of Gaza can begin to reconstruct their lives, and we all, including here in the United States, avoid what could be a catastrophic regional and perhaps beyond regional war.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. I didn't know if there's anyone else at the table who either wants to make an opening remark, or if not, then the one thing I sort of want to just begin by asking everyone, I know I gave a very brief bio of your loved ones, and I wanted to open up the floor if there was other things that you wanted to say about the folks who are being held in captivity.
I'm here because I was a hostage and I know what they're going through. I'm here for John and Rachel. They are not with us, that they just lost their son in such a brutal way. The 6 hostages that came home in conditions that aren't acceptable. I was there in the same kind of tunnels. I was there. I lost 10 kilos. Eden Yerushalmi weighed 36 kilos when she came out. And I'm here sitting and talking for them because they can't talk. I'm talking and screaming and shouting for them. What they're going through is beyond. What I went through is beyond. And us sitting here and knowing what they're going through, we have to be together, the whole world, and not accept. Anybody cannot do what they want to. And we can't let the evil win. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Aviva.
All right, folks, you've been listening to members of the families of hostages who are still being held in captivity by Hamas in Gaza. Next month, it will be a year since those hostages were taken, a year since this brutal war conflict began. Obviously, we are tracking all of the developments with these families who are here in Washington, D.C., speaking about their loved ones, in some cases giving biographies of their loved ones, clearly not forgotten by certainly their families, but also by those of us who just want all of this to end. Okay. For the first time in years, the Federal Reserve is expected to cut interest rates today. The Fed has left rates unchanged since their July meeting last year, and they remain at their highest point in the last 23 years. So let's bring in CBS News senior business and tech correspondent Jolene Kent to talk about this. Jolene, you were reporting on CBS Mornings earlier about this anticipated rate cut, this much anticipated rate cut. How much of a cut are economists expecting? And more importantly, what does it mean for our wallets?
Good morning, Vlad. Look, we know that it's going to be at least a quarter point. That is what Fed Chair Powell has been telegraphing for months, basically since July. The question is, will that larger half-point rate cut be on the table, known as a jumbo cut? It would certainly be outside of standard procedure. But we're taking a look at the CME Fed Watch tool, and we're seeing that traders are increasingly betting on the fact that it will be a half-point rate cut this afternoon when Fed Chair Powell issues that statement and then gives his press conference. But right now we're watching stocks, and it looks like the market is relatively unchanged, down just slightly on this news. But this has been something that folks have been waiting for years and looking for any relief when it comes to a car loan or credit card debt. Mortgage rates already floating down and could go much lower as a result of a rate cut here. But right now, if you take a look at what some of the larger banks are saying as for how how big of a cut it would be. Most likely a quarter point, and then another quarter point cut come November, and then again in December. But right now, it is all eyes on how big this cut will be and when it will actually take effect for consumers who are out there trying to save money and make the best of what's still, very sticky inflation, even though we're already slowing down to about 2.5%.
Yeah, and we just threw up the big board, Jolene, which you probably saw, and market is sort of flat for this morning. But how do you expect Wall Street will react to this news?
Look, if it's a half-point rate cut, we can expect the markets to really react. And that would be somewhat of a surprise, I think, for a lot of consumers out there who are bracing for something more of like a quarter point. But it's hard to say. We've seen a lot of movement in the markets over the past couple of months. September is notoriously volatile. And so looking ahead, it's really a question of what does this mean for credit card loans, for car loans, for mortgages. And also, if you're on the savings side of this and you've been taking advantage of a high-yield savings account, for example, your savings will no longer yield as much return if you're socking away money. So there is a downside to a rate cut, of course, as well, Vlad.
Jolene Kent reporting from Washington, D.C. for us this morning. Thanks, Jolene. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Vlad.
All right, let's talk about weather. The Northeast can see a little rain today for the first time in a bit. Let's bring in CBS News Philadelphia meteorologist Tammy Sousa with the first look at the national forecast. Tammy.
Well, hello, Vlad. Yeah, we are going to talk about a little bit of rain. Let's first talk about where the rain is falling right now, because we have two areas of concern. The first one is across the Rocky Mountains and into the Plains states. I'll get to that one in just a moment. But I want to talk about what's going on here in the Northeast, because that is the same rain system that brought all of that flooding to the Carolinas. Now, the bulk of this is staying offshore. It's actually formed a new area of low pressure, and it's moving to the north. But we are getting these scattered showers moving up through Virginia, Maryland, into Pennsylvania, South Jersey, into Delaware. They'll make their way toward New York today. So that is a good thing. Now, the forecast rainfall is not going to be like it was in the Carolinas. Could be some places pick up to a ½ inch or so, but this is very light rainfall that we're looking at. We also have the concern of coastal flooding because of that system out there pushing all that water along shore. So the usual spots that flood, be aware of that. And we also have a king tide because of that giant moon that's out there. Our other place of concern, again, look at this system winding up across the Rockies. And if you look closely, here you go. There's some snow at the tip of that system. We're expecting the possibility of severe weather today, large hail, wind, and tornadoes. That will continue tomorrow as we head into the Midwest. We'll talk temperatures when I come back in just a few minutes. Vlad?
All right, looking forward to that, Tammy. Thanks so much. Appreciate it. All right, folks, election officials in several states received suspicious packages in the mail. Coming up, we're going to tell you what we know about the unknown substance that was found inside and the FBI's investigation. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. Folks, we are 48 days away from Election Day, and the candidates are ramping up their efforts on the campaign trail. Donald Trump is holding a rally here in New York this evening. Last night, he appeared for a town hall in Flint, Michigan, marking his first campaign event since that second apparent assassination attempt on his life. Joining me now with the very latest is CBS News campaign reporter Libby Cathy. So Libby, what are you learning about the preparations for today's event? I saw on WCBS, our sister station here in New York City this morning, that there were crowds of people already lined up outside of Nassau Coliseum here in New York.
Yep, that's right, Vlad. Good morning to you. A senior campaign official with the Trump campaign telling me this morning that U.S. Secret Service has already increased its security footprint on former President Trump's detail ahead of that rally in Long Island today. Also, local law enforcement authorities in Nassau County, where that rally is taking place, already out in full force as people have already lined up hours ahead of the former president expecting to arrive there. Of course, the rally today is indoors. The senior campaign official telling me those are a little less of a challenge to secure. It's the outdoor events that they have more trouble with. And of course, that's where the two suspected assassination attempts happened, one at a rally, one golfing. The next outdoor event for the former president is going to be Saturday in Wilmington, North Carolina. He has a rally there at an airport hangar. That's more of the challenge for Secret Service looking ahead. And also if he makes any unscheduled movements, as what happened Sunday, and OTR, off the record movement, that they don't have as much time to plan to secure the area. That's what Secret Service is going to be watching out for. And of course, this all happening as Congress works to get them additional resources as well, Vlad.
And the other bit of news from last night's town hall was the former president talking about that assassination attempt. What did he say?
Yes, we saw this with the last assassination attempt after Butler. The former president not shy to talk about this, to recount what happened to him in his first person. He also revealed last night that that Vice President Kamala Harris called him up and wished him well after the event. This comes after President Joe Biden also called former President Trump. He says both of them couldn't have been nicer, quote. His rally goers or town hall goers not really liking that response, getting a little bit of a boo from that. Of course, the former president has also said that rhetoric from Democrats is what caused this to happen. Democrats would say not so fast, and they would say it's Trump that needs to turn down the temperature. But all in all, Trump says that running for president is a dangerous job. Let's take a listen.
It's a dangerous business, however, being president. It's a little bit dangerous. It's, they think race car driving is dangerous. No. They think bull riding, that's pretty scary, right? No. This is a dangerous business, and we have to keep it safe.
48 days to go, Vlad.
Yeah, the other, we just, in that clip, Libby, we saw Sarah Huckabee Sanders, the governor of Arkansas, former press secretary for President Trump. And she also made a comment yesterday that a lot of people found disturbing when she seemed to indicate that the vice president is somehow inadequate because she doesn't have children of her own. Of course, she's a stepmom to her husband's daughter. But what's the reaction from folks you've been speaking to about that?
Yeah, a lot of people on the left not happy with that comment from Arkansas Governor Sarah Huckabee Sanders, pretty much implying that Kamala Harris can't be as humble because she doesn't have biological children of her own. We've already seen Ella and Cole Imhoff's biological mother weigh in on Twitter to stick up, to defend Kamala Harris and say that she does not like this comment from Governor Sanders. We'll see if it gains more traction, Vlad.
At the end of the day, both of these campaigns are very, their base of support for both Republicans and Democrats is already baked in. What they're trying to go after are those independents, and I'm just curious if independent moms and independent women are going to be happy with those comments from the governor. Libby, Kathy, great to have you on. Thanks so much. All right, meanwhile, Vice President Harris was in the battleground state of Pennsylvania yesterday speaking to National Association of Black Journalists. She said she spoke to former President Trump personally, as you just heard Libby indicate, and she shared a little bit of their conversation with the panel. Listen.
I checked on him to see if he was okay. And I told him what I have said publicly. There's no place for political violence in our country. I am in this election and in this race for many reasons, including to fight for our democracy. And in a democracy, there is no place for political violence. We can and should have healthy debates and discussion and disagreements.
Today, the vice president will speak virtually to young voters as her campaign ramps up its efforts to register younger Americans to vote. She will also speak at the Congressional Hispanic Caucus Annual Leadership Conference to celebrate Hispanic Heritage Month. As a reminder, CBS News will host the only vice presidential debate between Senator J.D. Vance and Governor Tim Walz on Tuesday, October 1st in New York. You can catch our live coverage on CBS and streaming on CBS News 24/7 and Paramount Plus. All right, the FBI and the U.S. Postal Service are investigating after suspicious letters containing white powder were sent to state election officials across the country. The agencies are investigating at least a dozen incidents. Election offices in at least 6 states have confirmed receiving the suspicious mail. So far, the material in the letters does not appear to be hazardous. This is the second time suspicious packages were mailed to election officials on election or around Election Day. Congress has just 2 weeks to avoid a partial government shutdown. The House is voting today on House Speaker Johnson's funding bill to keep it open, but many assume it is dead on arrival. So what happens next? If that is the case, we're going to break it down. Next, you're streaming CBS News 24/7. All right, let's get you now to Capitol Hill, where the House GOP leadership is speaking after their conference meeting. There you see Speaker Mike Johnson. Let's listen.
50 days out from the election, we need Donald Trump to be protected, as any candidate of his stature would be. I called the White House yesterday. I made a demand of the White House, President Biden, supply for President Trump the same degree of protection that a sitting president has. He's a former president. I believe he's going to be the next president, and right now he's a candidate under the greatest threat of any candidate in modern political history. It justifies that level of protection. I think the White House, I hope the White House will see the wisdom in that, and I hope that they'll do everything they can, because the buck stops at the White House in the Oval Office, and President Biden has an obligation of that. Third, and finally, I don't want to reiterate what's been said so clearly and concisely here, but everybody needs to turn down the rhetoric. You just heard the selection of quotes, the threats that have been made by leading Democrats in this country. It is inexcusable and it is dangerous. It is leading people to be triggered. When members of Congress or the nominee for president of the Democratic Party says that President Trump must be eliminated, or that he's a threat to democracy, or they compare him to Hitler, there are people who are unstable, and it makes them do crazy things. This is common sense. Let's apply common sense. Let's have a vigorous debate on the policy differences, on the records, but let's turn the rhetoric down, because we're not going to be able to sustain that. Also this week, you heard from our dear colleagues here. The AP uncovered the latest example of election interference by the Democratic Party. Certain Democrats, the Patriot Run Project is what it's called. Everybody needs to look more deeply into this. Secret group connections to the Democratic political firms and liberal donors has been trying and been preying on independent candidates with disabilities or tragic life stories. You heard Congressman Nunn talk about the situation in his district. They're trying to register these people as third-party candidates and siphon votes away from Republicans in swing seats. This is dirty politics. It's unethical, it's immoral, it's illegal, and it must be stopped. No one should have to cheat to win an election. We want a free, fair, and safe election. We have to do everything within our power to make sure that happens. We know for a fact that this has impacted seats across the country. Our Republican incumbents like Marinette Miller-Meeks in Iowa, Don Bacon in Nebraska, Ryan Zinke in Montana, Jen Kiggins in Virginia, who you heard from this morning, they've been the targets of this. And in Minnesota, too, we know that they have worked to boost Democrat Angie Craig. It's unacceptable. The American people ought to call it out. It's unethical. Play by the rules, Democrats. Play by the rules. We're going to win this fair and square, and we're going to make sure. There's another election interference effort the Republicans are fighting right now, and that is to make sure that non-citizens are not allowed to vote in the election. And that is why we're bringing the SAVE Act again to the floor today. We're attaching it to the continuing resolution. Why are we doing that? It's very simple. Congress has two very important assignments right now, immediately to be done. One is to make sure the government is funded, and the second is to make sure our elections are secure. I've been traveling the country nonstop. As of last weekend, I've done campaign events in 206 cities across 39 states, 40 states I think now. I lose count. Every single public setting, when we turn to audience questions in these big gatherings, the first or second question, almost without exception, in every city, every town, every place.
All right, you've been listening to House Speaker Mike Johnson speaking to members of the press there. This is around security for the former president, increased security in the wake of that second assassination attempt, as well as issues around elections. So let's bring in CBS News congressional correspondent Scott McFarland to join me now to talk about this. So let's talk about the business that is most important to Americans right now, which is the funding bill, Scott. The funding bill, obviously, of tantamount importance. That the short-term funding bill is people are hoping to avoid a government shutdown. How likely is it that this bill will pass, and what kind of hurdles still remain?
Yeah, the House Speaker was just talking about immigration, but really he was talking about it in the context of that spending bill, Vlad. He is trying to get through the House this afternoon a bill to fund the government through March 28th, but include this thing called the SAVE Act, which would make it unlawful for any undocumented immigrant to vote in a federal election. He is sitting at a political poker table with a losing hand. He will not win this battle. It's unclear he even has sufficient Republican support to get this through the House today, but even if he could muster that, it's dead on arrival in the U.S. Senate, and some type of new negotiation will have to start. And that SAVE Act is a non-starter for so many Democrats who say it's already against the law for undocumented immigrants to vote in federal elections, and having this debate just fuels baseless conspiracy theories about 2020 in about November 2024. But they're going to try to get that message out today. Republicans want to campaign on the issue of immigration, and glad they believe this vote and this issue gives them a little more terrain to fight on.
Yeah, Scott, that's why I was very confused. I'm listening to Mike Johnson, and I'm thinking to myself, there's been a law on the books, the most recent since 1986, that prevents any non-citizens from voting in federal elections, and this actually goes back like half a century. So why are they making this a sticking point?
You can see the political strategy here, and note that he's standing in front of a blue curtain at that news conference. He's not at the Capitol. He's across the street at the campaign headquarters for Republicans. Different place, different set of conversations you can have. You can talk political there. And what he's doing is trying to get a formal vote on the books that says Democrats voted against this plan to block undocumented immigrants from voting in federal elections. The campaign ads Republicans will draft will not include that other stuff about it's already illegal, and Democrats say this is conspiracy theory stuff. It'll just say that initial set, that Democrats voted against a plan to block undocumented immigrants from voting in federal elections. You will see that ad in battleground districts and states across the country between now and November 5th.
Remarkable. Scott MacFarlane, as always, thank you, friend. All right, as we indicated earlier in the broadcast, former President Donald Trump is holding a campaign rally later today on Long Island. It will be his first in Sunday's apparent assassination attempt in Florida. As you can see from this video, there are cars that have been lined up in Uniondale since early this morning. Yesterday, Nassau County executives held a press conference to provide details on the security measures being put into place.
This is a small army of law enforcement professionals and first responders who are going to be making sure that this is a very safe and secure site and event.
Joining me now at the very latest is CBS News New York reporter Caroline Gussoff. So, Caroline, we saw those cars lining up this morning. What's the scene like right now where you are?
Well, Vlad, not only cars, but people on foot had been lined up since last night, trying to be first in line to get in here. And we were here when the police commissioner, the Nassau County Police Commissioner himself, unlocked the gates, signaling what kind of secure event this would be. For days, they've been telling us that this will be the safest place in the nation today. And the scene behind me, you can see cars have been pouring in since early this morning, since they opened the gates, and the parking lot here at the Nassau Coliseum, which accommodates about 16,000 people inside, is almost all full. People have been lining up. They will be opening the gates at 3 o'clock today amid very tight security. Of course, this is President Trump's first rally since his second assassination attempt. So the list of what is not allowed inside is extensive. And outside, we're told that there is security we can't even see. There's undercover police on buildings around us. We can see sharpshooters and police, and there are choppers overhead. So extraordinary measures to secure not only the president, but also this crowd.
All right, Caroline Gussoff reporting from Uniondale, where the former president of the United States is expected later today for a rally. Thank you, Caroline. All right, meanwhile, warring tensions are rising in the Middle East. Explosives hidden inside pagers were detonated simultaneously across Lebanon and Syria, killing at least a dozen people and injuring thousands. Hezbollah blames Israel and is vowing revenge. CBS News contributor Samantha Vinograd is in Washington, D.C. She is tracking these threats as we speak and is joining me now to talk about this. So Sam, the Hezbollah and the Lebanese are blaming Israel for carrying out this attack. We've heard Israel not comment at all on this. They rarely ever do. But what is your assessment based on your experience?
Well, my assessment is that Israel likely turned hundreds of devices into IEDs, or improvised explosive devices. Israel certainly has the capabilities to launch sophisticated physical sabotage attacks globally. They have conducted targeted assassinations and other forms of sabotage all around the world. This is most certainly, Vlad, an escalation in light of the number of targets they reportedly hit, as well as the civilian damage that was inflicted as well in another country. So I do assess that Israel has both the capabilities and the intent, based upon their ongoing conflict with Hezbollah, to conduct this attack and to turn these pagers into improvised explosive devices.
So, Sam, where do you think in the supply chain this happened? It would be a stretch to imagine that the Israelis had sources within Taiwan, although anything is possible, as you know, when it comes to espionage. But we do know that those devices were manufactured in Taiwan. I think they were routed through, I can't remember where the country, in where?
In Hungary, although I have to tell you, Vlad, there has been a lot of back and forth about where these devices were manufactured. Originally, reporting indicated that they were sourced to a company in Taiwan. The chief executive of that company in Taiwan indicated that they did not personally manufacture those devices, and perhaps one of their subsidiaries did. All signs were pointing to an entity in Hungary that reportedly had manufactured these devices. And shortly ago, the leader of Hungary indicated that these devices were not, in fact, manufactured in Hungary. So it is possible that there is another subsidiary or licensee of this company in Taiwan that manufactured these devices, or that these devices were imprinted with the insignia of the company to make them look like they were the same devices that ostensibly Hezbollah has been relying on for some time. But regardless of where they were manufactured, this is a massive intelligence coup for Israeli intelligence. They were able to identify the brand of pagers that Hezbollah was using, potentially get access to the supply chain for these pagers, understand when Hezbollah was receiving the shipment of pagers, and then in a coordinated way, have these pagers explode, again, as improvised explosive devices. So regardless of where they were manufactured, this is a major supply chain attack and a sign of Israel's extensive intelligence capabilities. And I think the key question is why? Why now, Vlad?
Yeah, well, so the other thing that I was thinking, Sam, is you're right. It is it's remarkable that the Israelis, if it is them, was able to carry something out like this. But again, just your assessment based on your years of experience tracking terror threats and what happens when we see incidents like this. There's something about detonating explosive devices where innocent people are, women and children. I understand, and everybody does, the stakes when countries are at war. These two countries are not at war. Israel is fighting a terrorist organization that seeks security within a state. But what is your take on just exploding these devices in supermarkets? I mean, in one of the videos that we're showing, you can see a little girl who's there with an adult. Presumably, she isn't hurt because I can see them sort of walking away. There she is at the top of the screen there with a couple of adults. There's two young children there. But this is sort of a new level of kind of warfare that we really haven't seen before.
Well, we have seen Israel taking, significant risks as it pertains to civilian safety in places like Gaza. And I'll just leave it, Vlad, as Israel and the United States have very different laws governing covert action and what is viewed as an appropriate amount of risk to civilian life. And I do think we saw that on full display in this reported Israeli operation targeting Hezbollah pagers in Lebanon yesterday.
Yeah, fascinating. Sam Vinograd, always great to have you, my friend. Thank you very much for your analysis and expertise. Great. Thank you. All right. A trail of destruction and a rising death toll. We're following the historic flooding and the race to secure riverbanks and drinking water as floodwaters move across Central Europe. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. Let's bring in CBS News Philadelphia meteorologist Tammy Sousa with another look at the national forecast. Tammy, over to you.
Oh, I am good. And hey, Vlad, what starts this Sunday? Do you know?
What starts this Sunday? I know there's a Brooklyn eating festival in my neighborhood, but no, what else?
Fall. Autumn. It's going to start at 8:44 in the morning Eastern time. It's finally going to be here. And then you can feel like eating a lot more. You can pull out the good boots and all the great jackets and everything that we haven't been able to do so far. But enjoy that eating festival. All right, let's take a look at what's going on temperature-wise and why this is actually going to feel so fall-like. We have big temperature changes. You can see in the northeast, we actually have clouds. We have a system there cooling us down. And we have one across the middle part of the country that's going to cool down down the West Coast, which has not been cool. It's been anything but cool across the West. Here's what's going on nationwide. Again, cooler air making its way into the western United States. We have that big frontal boundary that'll bring some storms, strong to severe storms, even some snow up into parts of the northern Rockies. Then we move to the central part of the country. We leave the West Coast, which is going to start to cool down. We get the heat that is actually building and pushing up the plains. Places like Chicago will be pushing the upper 80s again. We have rain across the Gulf Coast states, and we have rain up and down the East Coast, and that is going to be a cooling effect. This system is bringing us all the clouds and the cooler weather. So temperatures today, look at those 70s, even the upper 90s for Phoenix. Finally, no triple digits, but look up and down the plains at those upper 90s, and nice and cool once we get to the Northeast. Vlad?
All right, Tammy, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Emergency officials in Poland are putting down sandbags along riverbanks after catastrophic flooding. They're hoping to save the crumbling embankments. Heavy flooding from recent rain has displaced people across Central Europe, including the Czech Republic and Slovakia and Austria. CBS News foreign correspondent Ramy Inocencio is in London with more on the aftermath. Ramy, just describe for us the scope of the devastation right now.
Vlad, hi there. Yeah, well, 8 countries in Central and Southern Europe have now either been hit by massive flooding or are seeing water levels rising right now. First, it was Central Europe that got hit by those rains from Storm Boris. Southern Poland is what we're talking about, the northern Czech Republic on the border, a lot of Austria and parts of Romania that we're seeing there with the likes of rivers bursting their banks, dams collapsing and floods running through towns and villages, killing at least so far 21 people. And now we know Southern Europe is bracing for a lot of the same. Italy right now is getting hit. The country's got weather alerts north of Florence, stretching hundreds of miles down south. And as you mentioned, authorities in Croatia, Hungary's capital, Budapest, Slovakia's capital, Bratislava, they're all warning people of flooding to hit them in the next couple of days. But, you know, while the worst of the rains are over for countries a little more north, the damage only now is being made more apparent. We're seeing that now with water levels pulling back. Poland, they're saying, is now under a month-long state of natural disaster.
Those images are just absolutely devastating. Ramy Inocencio reporting from the UK for us this morning. Thank you, Ramy.
You bet.
All right, the stars were out last night to celebrate former President Jimmy Carter ahead of his 100th birthday. We're going to bring you some of that celebration just ahead. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. Oh boy, stars were out last night. B-52s and others based in Georgia performed last night in Atlanta for a 100th birthday celebration for former President Jimmy Carter. The former president is known for his love of music. Performances also included Group Love, The War and Treaty, Charlene Carter, Eric Church, Chuck Leavell from the Allman Brothers. And there you see right there on your screen, that is the son of the legendary Dickie Betts, who was the guitar player for the Allman Brothers. They are playing for the president's birthday. He will turn 100 on October 1st. Check out that old photo on Google of President Carter with Elvis Presley. That's how big of a music fan he was. Let's bring in CBS News Philadelphia meteorologist Tammy Sousa with the last look at the national forecast. Tammy, good to see you again.
It's good to see you, Vlad. Yeah, in Atlanta, they dealt with some showers last night. It'll start to dry out today. But we're watching what was that system in the Carolinas now move up the East Coast. Much of it has moved out to sea. So showers for the Northeast today. Severe weather as we see a big system unfolding across the plains and headed toward the Midwest. That could have large hail, winds, and tornadoes. Along the East Coast, coastal flooding because of the system that's out there. So be aware of that. Light showers also. Some of these are the first showers that we have seen in 10 to 12 days. Vlad, back to you.
All right, Tammy, thank you very much. Appreciate it. All right, folks, you're looking at some live pictures coming into the CBS newsroom right this very moment of pictures in Beirut, Lebanon, where we are learning that there is perhaps another device that exploded in that capital city of Lebanon. As we reported earlier with our Sam Vinograd, this is believed to have been the work of the Israelis. They have not commented at all on this, but dozens of devices exploded yesterday, targeting members of the terror organization Hezbollah. And so this is apparently another device that has just exploded in Beirut. We're going to keep an eye on this story and bring you more as we learn it. Meanwhile, an encore of CBS Mornings is next. This is CBS News 24/7.